Hello and welcome to Wellness Live. I'm your host, Dr. Olivia Moses, and this broadcast is brought to you by Loma University Health's Living Whole office. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at Living Whole, we talk about many things that affect us and our wellness. Now, today we have a very special speaker for us to talk about nutrition. Now, all of us are affected by nutrition. Well, we all eat. However, we also are bombarded by messaging about what we eat. And there are fads going around. There are diets going around. They say something is good for us, and then maybe it's not good for us. And sometimes it is hard to weed through fact and fiction. So we have a very special guest. Her name is Esmerelda Valluru, and she is one of our dietitians here in the Living Whole Wellness Program at Loma. Now, Esmerelda has been with us for over 10 years, and she is also a certified health coach. And she does wonderful work with our employees and is the perfect person to talk to us about nutrition. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Esmerelda Valluru.
Thank you, Dr. Moses, for the invitation. So let's go ahead and get started here with our topic on fibermaxxing. Just bear with me while I share this screen, and hopefully I'm doing it right, but I think it's there. Okay, great. So we'll be exploring fibermaxxing 101, the social media trend backed by science. Let's get started. So a little outline for what we hope to cover this afternoon. What is fibermaxxing? The current fiber consumption gap, why fiber matters, the science behind fiber, sources of fiber, and how to fibermax safely, practical tips and meal ideas. We'll talk about a couple of common myths, and also hopefully at the end of this presentation, we can all leave with a little bit of an action plan for moving forward now that we've discussed a little bit more about fibermaxxing. So what exactly is fibermaxxing? This is not a clinical term. I think that needs to be very clear. It's not a clinical term, but rather a social media wellness trend that encourages maximizing daily fiber intake. So this has gained momentum on social media platforms like TikTok and others over the past year, especially around mid 2025. It's been getting a lot of attention. So if you're on social media, you may have came across the hashtag fibermaxxing. So the goal behind this fibermaxxing concept is basically to get those benefits connected to consuming more fiber. And we're going to talk about the science behind these benefits. And so some of the benefits that are proposed: boost digestion, heart health, and just overall well-being, and plus more. So we'll talk about more regarding that. So when it comes to the current fiber consumption gap, according to the dietary guidelines for Americans, more than 90% of women and 97% of men do not meet the recommended intakes when it comes to dietary fiber. And it is a public health nutrient of concern, according to the dietary guidelines for Americans. So when it comes to how much we're consuming, as you can see here on the slide, the average American is currently averaging about 15 grams a day. And the recommendation, as you can see here on the bar graph, is we're not nearly at optimal levels. And just so you can get an idea, the current recommendation for 2 to 3-year-olds, so your toddlers, is about 15 grams. And that's currently what we're averaging right now. So there's definitely room for improvement. And we'll talk about some of those really great benefits that you can get connected to fibermaxxing. So how much fiber do we need? The recommendation is for women 25 grams per day, and for men 38 grams a day. And we'll talk a little bit more about some ideas on how we can get closer to this recommendation, because according to what you just learned, we're not getting enough. So that's why I kind of like this social media wellness trend right now, because we need some attention on this nutrient, because it is a nutrient of public health concern. So let's talk a little bit about this gap and why it's happening. So a couple of contributing factors. There's a shift towards processed food. So we're consuming a lot of processed food. Nothing wrong with processed food, but the reality is that a lot of these ultra processed foods are often lower in fiber, but higher in fat, added sugars, and sodium. And so that's, one of those contributing factors. Another thing to consider is that the average American, we're also not getting enough fruits and vegetables. And this is also according to the dietary guidelines for Americans. So excuse me, about 80% of the US population does not meet the fruit recommendations, and almost 90% does not meet the recommendation for vegetables. So clearly, there's some work there as well to be done. And this is where we can get a lot of that fiber consumption, because the recommendation, if you follow the My Plate method, at least half of our plate should be those fruits and vegetables. And so there's definitely room for improvement. This is a big source of where we can actually get this fiber. Another contributing factor is lack of awareness. A lot of people, believe it or not, are not aware that this is a public health nutrient of concern. In addition to that, people don't really know how much we need to be consuming. And we just talked about that, between 25 to 38 grams a day, depending male versus female. But another thing to consider as well is that fiber is also often not emphasized in marketing. So when you're going to your local grocery store, you're probably seeing a lot of the messaging promoting protein or low carb messaging. And so currently we don't really have that messaging around fiber. And it's really unfortunate, because there's a lot of great benefits that we can get from consuming a fiber-rich diet. And we'll talk about that shortly. So why does fiber matter? It's a type of carbohydrate that our body cannot digest. So these are just a few of the benefits that we'll be talking a little bit more of. So it's good for our digestive system. It promotes satiety without those extra calories. It's good for cholesterol control, blood sugar control, weight management, and also fiber helps excrete toxins via stool as well. So many fantastic benefits. So let's talk a little bit about soluble fiber versus insoluble fiber. So when it comes to soluble fiber, this dissolves in water and it forms a gel-like consistency, which is super helpful in slowing digestion and also making you feel full after you're done with a nice meal. It also helps regulate blood sugar and cholesterol levels. And we also have a lot of research backing this up. It's not just a couple of studies there. We have a lot of randomized control studies that have been done that prove this to be true. And so you can find soluble fiber in oats, chia seeds, apples, beans, and fruits, just to name a few examples. So let's talk about insoluble fiber. This does not dissolve in water, and it adds bulk to your stool, preventing constipation. So it supports, once again, your digestive system by promoting those regular bowel movements. You can find this insoluble fiber in things like whole grains, vegetables, for example. And we'll talk about a few more other examples of where we can get our fiber through our diet. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind these great benefits that we see connected to a fiber-rich diet. So one of them is that it supports digestive health. So it feeds that beneficial gut bacteria, especially because it has those non-digestible fibers have that prebiotic effect that allow us to just feed that healthy gut bacteria. So in addition to that, producing short chain fatty acids that promote a healthier colon environment. In addition to that, that travels throughout the body, lowering inflammation, supporting immunity, heart health, longevity, and much more. So really valuable when it comes to just our gut health, colon health, and there's a lot of great research supporting that. In addition to that, there's also benefits around managing glucose levels. So fiber improves that glycemic control by moderating glucose absorption. So improves glucose metabolism and also insulin sensitivity. So it's a really valuable tool when it comes to managing glucose levels. Moving forward, cardiovascular health. And this is where we see, when it comes to soluble fiber specifically, this has the most consistent randomized control trials backed benefit. So this is where we really see a great benefit when it comes to lowering LDL cholesterol. So what happens is that soluble fiber binds with cholesterol in the digestive system, helping remove it from your body. This process is what's going to be super helpful in helping us lower the LDL cholesterol levels in our body that are considered like the bad cholesterol, reducing our overall cardiovascular risk. There was a meta-analysis of 22 studies found that each additional 7 grams of fiber lowered cardiovascular disease risk by 9%. So significant benefits that we're seeing when it comes to cholesterol, managing cholesterol levels. Another benefit here is it's when it comes to weight management, supporting healthy weight management. So weight control is another benefit of these high fiber diets because it helps you feel full longer and you're more satisfied after a nice meal or snack. And so in one large study, adults who ate several servings of whole grains a day were less likely to have gained weight or gain less weight than those who rarely consume these whole grains. And as you know, if you've seen this My Plate method, you probably have seen that a quarter of our plate is recommended to be whole grains or complex carbohydrates. And this is one of those food groups where we can get a lot of this fiber and get the benefits connected to that. So let's talk a little bit about the research so far. There was a meta-analysis of almost 250 studies confirmed on a large scale that eating lots of fiber, specifically from vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, can decrease your risk of dying from heart disease and cancer. Another particular study found that those who ate the most fiber reduced their risk of dying from cardiac disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and colon cancer by 16 to 24%. So additional, really great benefits that we're seeing from these meta-analyses on fiber. In a couple of observational studies, we saw some really great findings that those who ate more fiber had a 23% lower risk of all-cause mortality. So really great benefits when it comes to not only our meta-analysis research, but also in observational studies, we're seeing really great benefits. So let's talk a little bit about the sources of fiber. So if you're incorporating a lot of whole foods in your diet, you're probably getting a good amount of fiber. So you can find it in fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains, beans and legumes, essentially whole foods is where you're going to get all of the this beneficial fiber. Okay, let's see here. So if you're interested in getting started, adding a little bit more fiber into your diet, these are a couple of high fiber foods. So for example, beans are fantastic when it comes to fiber. Chia seeds, I love to sprinkle these on my yogurt in the morning or oatmeal. Or you can make chia pudding. That's also one of my personal favorites. Raspberries, when it comes to fruit, raspberries are one of those fruits at the top of the list when it comes to being really high in fiber per serving. So it's a really great source of fiber. Flax seeds, oatmeal, green peas, chickpeas, lentils. These are just a few examples. They're not the only ones. But if you're interested in getting started with some of these higher fiber rich foods, these are some really great examples. I want to bring to your attention a handout that we have on our website that goes more into depth in terms of other options for fiber-rich sources. If you go to the website and look under wellness handouts and search fiber, you'll be able to see this handout and you can print it out. But there's a lot of great information there along with a lot of great sources of fiber that you can start adding into your diet. So when it comes to fiber on the nutrition label, so you're probably out there buying groceries and looking at labels. And some of the things that I like to look at when I'm there, I'm buying new products that haven't been introduced into my kitchen. I like to look at the fiber content in these foods. So under total carbohydrates, you'll see the specific amount of fiber that is added or that is naturally there in that product. And so for example, these 5% daily values in bold on the right side of the food label, 5% or less represents that it's low in a nutrient versus 20% daily value or more represents that it's high in a nutrient. So typically when I'm there scanning at products, I like to compare similar products and look for something that offers me a little bit more fiber per carbohydrate. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But at the very minimum, if you're interested in increasing your fiber intake, we should be looking for products that are maybe closer to that 20% daily value. It's a little quick way to kind of quickly glance and look to see if it's a high fiber food product versus a low fiber food product. Or if you're interested in just specific numbers versus looking at the percent daily values, a good source of fiber would be a product that has 3 grams of fiber per serving, or an excellent source of fiber would be something that has 5 grams of fiber per serving. So you can either look at those percent daily values, or you can look at the specific number to decide whether it's a great source of fiber. I also like this 10-to-1 carb to fiber ratio as well when I'm analyzing products out there in the market. So there was a study published in Public Health Nutrition that found that foods that met this 10-to-1 carb to fiber ratio, they had significantly more fiber, less added sugar, sodium, and overall they had just a healthier nutrition profile. So this is how this system works. So essentially, for every 10 grams of carbohydrates that you see in a food label, at the very minimum, you want to be able to identify 1 gram of fiber. So for every 10 grams, you want to see at least 1 gram of fiber. And so if you look here on this slide, this product has about 46 grams of carbohydrates. So going by this 10-to-1 carb to fiber ratio, we probably want to see about maybe 4.6 grams of fiber. And clearly, as you can see here on the slide, it has much more than that. It has 7 grams and a 25% daily value. If we go by that criteria that we just discussed in the earlier slide, 20% or more daily value represents that it's higher in fiber. And so just a couple of things to know when you're out there in the grocery store, if you're looking for a product that it's fiber rich or a really great source of fiber, this could be a really helpful tool as well. Okay, I think this is time for questions. If anybody has questions, we are happy to answer those.
Thank you so much, Esmerelda. That was information-packed first half. So we have to get to some questions here. And just a reminder, if you're watching us live, go ahead and type your questions into the comments section and we will ask Esmerelda right now. So number one, this kind of gets to the idea of, you mentioned, Esmerelda, that social media kind of drives some of this messaging. So they came up with this idea of fibermaxxing. So what is the difference between fibermaxxing and actually getting the right amount of fiber?
Yes, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide that we have here. But essentially, in a nutshell, fibermaxxing is just maximizing your daily fiber intake. So going at the level, at the requirement or above that requirement. And we'll talk about a couple of things to consider if you're interested in going above the recommendation when it comes to fiber, and how do we get started with adding fiber into our diet. There's some things that we need to really be mindful of. One thing I want to leave it for the next slide, but we definitely don't want to go from 15 grams to 25 grams the next day. There's a couple of things to consider, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But in terms of the recommendation, as you saw in an earlier slide, 25 grams for women and about 38 grams for men. In studies, that's usually what we're seeing for the participants in there. I'm not seeing really studies where they're incorporating maybe more than 40 grams of fiber. So we definitely probably don't want to have too much. But when it comes to this concept, there are some things to be mindful of in terms of that fibermaxxing concept. But like we shared earlier, it's not a clinical term. So that needs to be very clear that it's not a clinical term. However, it is a nice idea because the reality is there should be some attention on fiber. It is a nutrient of public health concern. We're not getting enough. And as you saw, there's a lot of research supporting that we can get really great benefits connected to fiber. So hopefully that helped answer that question.
Sure. So speaking of social media, how do we really maneuver our way through fact and fiction? This is one that you actually liked, but I'm sure there's many that you see and say, wow, this is not science-based at all.
Right. And right now, there's just a lot of misinformation, unfortunately, when it comes to nutrition on social media. The best thing is always to connect with your primary care physician for information, but registered dietitians, they're nutrition experts. They have a lot of years of behind them in terms of working with clients, and just they have evidence-based research that they're analyzing. So if you're looking for credible information, I would recommend, first of all, our Living Whole website. There's a lot of great content there on nutrition, wellness. So that's one way to get your credible information. Another option is, recently, actually, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has developed a series of content around fact checking, so around common popular trends right now. And so if you're interested in really getting good nutrition information, go to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. There's a lot of great content there that's evidence-based as well. And so if it's coming from a health organization, it's credible. If it's coming from a .gov website, it's probably credible. Or a registered dietitian as well. They're usually, going by the latest science, it's evidence-based, but the reality is that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and you want to consult your doctor and a registered dietitian before starting a new diet, before starting maybe even a new supplement, because we could potentially be doing more harm than good by starting that, because the reality is that your doctor has more access to your medical history, treatments that you're currently on, medications. There could be some interactions with medications that you're on, and maybe diets and that you're interested in going on, or a supplement. And so the best approach is to consult your doctor first, a registered dietitian that can take a closer look at your medical history and make some really sound recommendations. But unfortunately, social media is probably not the safest place to get started in terms of learning about more of nutrition. Yes, you'll find some credible registered dietitians there, so follow them, get some really great content. But if it's somebody that's not a registered dietitian or not credible, you want to maybe think twice before starting to implement some sort of diet or start a supplement that you might not have a lot of information on.
That's an excellent point, Esmeralda. And one of the things that we try to inform individuals, when there's a secret out there, or somebody doesn't want you to know, or, when that kind of language is out there, you want to have a little bit of a red flag to make sure that your clinician, whether it is your dietitian or your primary care physician, you really want to talk to them about it. Now we have another question, Esmeralda, that's come through, and this talks about the different forms of food. So when you had that slide that talked about raspberries and peas and, that type of thing, do we lose some fiber when it's cooked or canned or frozen? Could you answer that for our audience?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was just looking actually recently at some research, and it's very minimal. If we're talking about decimal points, it's nothing significant in terms of that fiber that you'll lose. The only time that you'll probably lose a very significant amount of fiber is if you're juicing. If you're juicing, you're stripping away all of that fiber from these fruits and vegetables. And so I really encourage you, if juicing is something you're exploring, also, that's probably something to consult with your doctor, because especially if you're doing it as a diet, because it's not really balanced. We encourage a balanced diet that incorporates your healthy carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And oftentimes when we're juicing, we're stripping our way from all of these other food groups that are super valuable. So yes, I would encourage you to, for sure, just consult your doctor. And but yeah, it's something to really be paying attention to.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Esmeralda. Why don't we get to the second half of your presentation?
Okay, great. So let me go ahead and come back here. Okay, great. I believe you all can see the slides. Okay, so let's talk about how to fiber max safely, because yes, it is a really great concept. However, there are some things to consider if you're interested in increasing your fiber intake. We want to do so gradually. We don't want to go from 15 grams to 25 grams or 38 grams the next day. So while it's generally safe, it's important to gradually increase your fiber and water intake. That's another big one. So yes, you want to, if you're interested in increasing fiber, you also want to increase that water intake to give your GI tract time to adapt, to also avoid some abdominal discomfort. So what will happen is you'll get some digestive discomfort, like bloating, for example, gas, cramps, irregular bowel movements, especially if fiber is increased too quickly. So that's something big that we really want to consider. You don't want to go, once again, from 15 grams to 25 grams the next day. You want to gradually increase that fiber amount. In extreme cases, overdosing on fiber can lead to more severe complications such as bowel obstructions. So you definitely also want to consider staying around that range of the 38 grams for men and 25 grams for women. We want to try to not overdo it when it comes to fiber, because you will experience some digestive discomfort, especially if you're increasing fiber rapidly. You're going to not feel comfortable. And so the best approach is to do it gradually. So a couple of safety considerations. It's not appropriate for everyone. So some medical conditions, including those with IBS or IBD, so irritable bowel disease or other gut conditions, you need to talk to your doctor first or a registered dietitian before Fibermaxxing. So it's not definitely something that might not be for everyone, and consult your doctor before starting any diet. So how to Fibermax your plate. So if you're interested in getting started, if there's no other medical conditions, if you have your doctor's approval, these are some really simple ways to Fibermax your plate. So veggies, at least 3 or more different colors. I always promote that idea because every color has different specific phytochemicals that have very specific benefits. If we can get some color in those vegetables, fantastic. So at least half of our plate should be vegetables. That's really where we're going to get a really great amount of fiber, a healthy source of protein, because we want this plate to be balanced. We also want to incorporate either whole grains or complex carbohydrates. These are just a few examples, and also healthy sources of fat. So this would be a really fantastic way to Fibermax our plate. There's a really good amount of fiber in that plate. And ideally, this should be something that we follow maybe for lunch and dinner, where we're incorporating these vegetables ideally at every meal. So a couple of examples that we can engage in, just simple swaps that we can make so we can increase our fiber intake. So for example, instead of white rice, and I'm not suggesting that you convert from white rice to brown rice or quinoa every day. I think there's room to allow the different, taste buds. If we prefer the white rice, there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe a couple times per week, it might be a really great idea to incorporate some sort of whole grain. For example, quinoa, a serving has about 5 grams of fiber. And so not only that, but it's also a great protein source as well. So this is a really simple change that it will increase our fiber intake. Switching from regular pasta to maybe a whole wheat version or a chickpea version will also increase your fiber intake. As you can see, in regular pasta, we have about 2.5 grams of fiber per serving, versus when it comes to the chickpea or whole wheat, you get about 6 to 7 grams per serving. And if we were to swap our conventional cereal for maybe something like oatmeal, we're obviously going to increase that fiber amount as well. And then white bread to a whole wheat bread. And it doesn't, once again, have to be every day. Just a couple times per week would be a great way to increase that fiber in your diet. So some simple strategies to boost your fiber intake. Start your day with fiber. That's one of my approach to ensuring that I get a good amount of fiber throughout the day, because sometimes things can go a little different throughout the day where we are pressed for time. But if you ensure at least that first meal of the day has a good source of fiber, it's a fantastic way to start your day, because it's going to give you those feelings of fullness and satisfaction until your next meal. So whether it's a bowl of oatmeal, for example, topped with nuts and berries, or whole grain toast with some avocado. Another strategy, super simple, just make sure that half your plate is vegetables. Just by doing that alone, you're increasing your fiber intake. So this is what 25 to 38 grams of fiber looks like in a day. So it doesn't really have to be complicated. As you saw, it's just simple swaps that we can make in the earlier slides. We're not talking about extravagant cooking behind the scenes. It's a little simple changes that you can do to increase that fiber intake. But for example here, this breakfast avocado whole grain toast. So if you were to replace your white bread with a whole grain option, 2 slices have about 6 to 8 grams, depending on the brand of whole wheat bread that you buy. For example, Dave's Pillar Bread has 5 grams of protein and fiber per slice. So if you consume something like that, that has already 10 grams of fiber just in that sandwich alone. So you probably don't even need to make any modifications to that meal, because just 2 slices alone already provides you a really good amount of fiber. But half an avocado, about 5 grams of fiber. If you sprinkle some hemp seeds in there, maybe about 1 gram of fiber in there. And for lunch, a garbanzo salad, it could be bean salad or garbanzos, but half a cup gives you about 6 grams of fiber. And then your favorite veggies in there. Traditionally, it's like with cucumber, tomatoes, and bell peppers. You'll get maybe 3 to 5 grams of fiber there, a tablespoon of olive oil and a lemon dressing, some herbs and spices in there. So this is another great way to get that fiber for lunch. And then for dinners, a stir fry with a lean choice of protein like tofu and veggies. A half block of tofu gives you about 2 grams of fiber, 1 cup of broccoli, 5 grams of fiber, some veggies in there. Serve with a half cup of brown rice, which gives you about 2 grams of fiber. So really simple things that we can make at home. It doesn't have to be extravagant cooking behind the scenes to increase our fiber intake throughout the day. So for example, for snack, if we have a 1 medium apple with the skin, just that apple alone gives you 4 grams of fiber. And if you add it with some handful of almonds or nuts, 3 to 4 grams of fiber there. So just this lunch, dinner, breakfast, and snack gives you about 25 to 38 grams of fiber in a day. So just simple little things that you can do throughout the day to increase your fiber and get closer to the requirements. So let's touch a little bit on this myth here. So you can get enough fiber from supplements alone. The reality is that there are supplements out there when it comes to fiber that are also evidence-based. There's research supporting them in terms of being a great fiber-rich source. But the reality is that supplements can help, but whole foods provide you with those vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals that you probably are not going to get through the supplement. So the best source is always going to be whole foods instead of your supplement, because they're stripping away some of these important micronutrients that you find in these whole foods. So yeah, supplements can be great, but if you're able to incorporate those whole foods more often than not, you're going to get more benefits connected to that. Another myth, if you eat whole wheat bread, you're getting plenty of fiber. So the reality is that many whole wheat products are partially whole grain. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're loaded with fiber. So it's a really great idea to read that ingredient list. Always check the label for at least 3 to 5 grams of fiber per serving. So when I'm out there buying some sort of bread, I like to be able to see at least 3 to 5 grams of fiber per serving, per slice of bread. So the first ingredient should be a whole grain, not enriched flour. Wheat flour is not considered a whole grain, but whole wheat is. So just a couple of little terms to be on the lookout when you're looking at the nutrition facts label and reading ingredient lists as well. If you're interested in exploring new recipes that are fiber rich, that are plant-based, there's a lot of great recipes on the website. There's a QR code there that you can scan, but these are fantastic. They're analyzed by a registered dietitian. They have a nutrition facts label with information on all of the macronutrients, micronutrients that are listed at the bottom. So really great recipes, plant-based, and a lot of them have good sources of fiber. And if you're interested in getting some idea of how to create simple meals that are plant-based and fiber-rich, We have a lot of great videos on our website that are archived and just easily available. You can just click play and you'll be able to be guided through simple recipes that you can create at home that are plant-based. So let's talk a little bit about an action plan for moving forward. So one of the best ways that you can get an idea of how you're currently doing with fiber is by tracking. And one of the ways in which you can track is either doing it yourself with paper and pen, or you can use a food tracker, for example, like MyFitnessPal, and track for a couple of days, maybe about 3 days. And you'll get an idea of how you're averaging when it comes to fiber. That way you can make a plan moving forward on simple little swaps that you can make in your diet to increase your fiber intake. So another idea here is to add one fiber-rich food to every meal. That's just one simple way to ensure you're getting those benefits connected to the fiber. And also make sure that you're increasing it gradually. You don't want to go from 15 grams to 25 grams. Do so gradually to avoid all of that GI discomfort that could happen and that will happen. So do it gradually, maybe 2 to 3 grams increase until you get to the 25 or the 38 grams a day. If you're looking, I think, did I go back? I think I went backwards. My apologies. So in summary, most Americans, as you know, are only averaging about 15 grams a day, which is far below the recommendation of 25 to 38 grams a day. You want to increase your fiber gradually and pair it with water. So if you're increasing your fiber intake, we also want to see you increasing your water intake to avoid digestive discomfort. And another thing I want to emphasize is that simple swaps and small daily changes can help you fiber max your plate. So it really doesn't have to be complicated. It shouldn't be overwhelming. It's essentially just adding more whole foods to our diet as a simple way to increase our fiber intake and get all of these great benefits that are connected to fiber.
Well, thank you so much.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Esmeralda, for your presentation today. We are short on time, but let's get to some quick questions. So you mentioned it's a good idea not to change your whole world when it comes to fiber overnight, going from 15 to 25 or more. So one of the questions I have for you is, how should someone increase? So should they increase it by maybe 3 grams a day and then wait how many days and, over time? How would you suggest one do that?
Yes, I would recommend maybe increasing it by 1 to 3 grams a day, and then maybe doing that for a couple of days, see how you feel comfortable with that amount. And then after that, maybe increase by a few more grams. Once you feel that that increase was good with your digestion, there's no discomfort, then maybe, you can start increasing an additional one after a couple of days until you get closer to that 25 days. So you just have to check in with yourself and just see how you're feeling as well. And I think the gradual approach is going to be really helpful because we don't want you to get discouraged from these potential discomfort and just give up altogether on fiber.
Right. So, one of the things is we want to go gradually. If I would start tomorrow, what would your recommendation be to start something tomorrow to do one thing?
Yeah, if you want to do one thing, I would say vegetables are a great place to start. The reality, as you saw in the presentation, is that we're not eating enough vegetables, and that's one simple way to increase our fiber intake. So if you can at least have half your plate be vegetables, I think not only are you getting the benefits connected to fiber, but you're getting all of these micronutrients, these vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals. So there's just a lot of triple benefits that you're getting just by that tip alone. So I would say start with vegetables and add your favorites.
That's fantastic. So another question we have is basically when we are on, and some people may be on a diet and they may be on a high protein, some may be on a low carb diet. What is a good way to maintain your fiber level when you're on those diets?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The best way would actually be to track. If you're concerned that maybe you're not getting optimal levels, I would encourage you to track for a couple of days or maybe weeks until you find a good balance of what that represents for you. You don't probably have to continue tracking, because as you track maybe for a couple of days or weeks and you feel comfortable with that amount, you'll know how much you need with that particular diet that you're on, whether it's a low carb diet, whether it's a protein rich diet. And yeah, so I would encourage you to track to get a better understanding of where you're at and where you should be with that particular diet that you're following.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Esmeralda, for this wealth of information. And it's actually really practical. One of the things that I think everyone will be surprised at is if you start just eating high fiber foods, it's actually pretty easy to get the recommended daily amount if you are deliberate in that. But thank you again for all of the information and for being with us today. And we want to thank all of you for being with us as well and being, very consistent viewers of Wellness Live. We enjoy our time together. And I want to make sure that you know that we will be meeting again September 25 at this same time, which is noon PST. So again, my name is Dr. Olivia Moses.